Interlude 2. UZAN-IYA. By the third year of her apprenticeship, Carolyn had mostly forgotten the outside world. Most of the other supplements their studies with going outside, or at least vacation. Michael went to the woods or the ocean. David killed scores of men on every continent. Margaret followed them down to the forgotten lands. Jennifer called some of them back. Carolyn's studies did not require travel. Native speakers were brought to her when she needs practice. And after the summer with Aisha and Aisha, she no longer cared to take vacations. So her world was only the library. Her studies, the only escape. She spent her childhood in a circle of golden lamplight, bounded on all sides by teetering stacks of books, folios, dusty, crumbling parchment. One day, when she was about 11 years old, in calendar terms, at least, it occurred to her that she no longer remembered what her actual parents looked like. Time was different in the library. She lost track of the exact count of languages she was fluent in at around 50. Trophies was never her thing, but she thought that whatever the count was, it was probably pretty high. One of the more challenging was the language of the Atul, a tribe in the Himalayan steppe that had died over about 6,000 years ago. The Atul had been linguistically isolated. Their grammar was nearly impenetrable, and they had some exotic cultural norms. One such was the notion of UZAN-IYA, which was what they called at the moment when an innocent heart first contemplated the act of murder. To the Atul, the crime itself was secondary to their initial corruption. Carolyn found that idea and its implication fascinating. She was turning this over in her mind one dry summer afternoon when she realized, with a bit of irritation, that her stomach was rumbling. When had she last eaten? The day before? The day before that? She went down to the ladder, but it was bare. Oops. She went down to the larder, but it was bare. She called out for Peter, whose catalog included the preparation of food. No answer. She walked to the front door and went out into the Garrison Oaks. Jennifer was sitting on the porch, studying. Hey, Carolyn. Good to see you outside for a change. Is there any food? Jennifer laughed. Driven out by hunger? I might have known. Yeah. I think some of the dead ones got a grocery dump last week. Which ones? Third house down? Thanks. Want me to get you anything? Nah, I'm good. But Jennifer looked up and down the streets furtively. You may want to swing by my room tonight. Why? What's up? Michael brought this back from his last trip. She held up a little baggie with green leaves in it. What is it? It's called marijuana. Supposedly, if you smoke it, it makes you feel good. We're going to try it tonight. Carolyn considered. Can't. I got a test tomorrow. The last time she missed a question, father gave her 10 lashes. Oh, okay, next time. Love to. Carolyn paused. You might ask Margaret, though. I think she could use a little fun. Margaret was no longer screaming herself awake every night, which was a relief, but she developed a nervous giggle that was at least as bad. Jennifer made a sour face. I'll ask. She didn't sound happy about it. What's the problem? You two used to be buddies. Margaret stinks, Carolyn. And she and I haven't hung out in ages. You really need to get out of your room more. Oh, come to think of it, Margaret actually had s- smelled pretty bad last couple of times Carolyn has seen her. Well, it's not really her fault. No, it's not. But she still stinks. Carolyn's stomach rumbled, audible to both of them. I've got to go get something to eat, she said apologetically. I'll catch up with you later. She hurried off down the road. The house of Garrison Oaks belonged to father now, as did the things that lived in them. Most of the home had dead ones inside as camouflage. These were what remained of the children's actual parents, and some other neighborhoods who hadn't been vaporized on adoption day. Carolyn wasn't entirely sure how they had been transferred into the dead ones, but she had a guess. For a year or so, father had been murdering Margaret 2 or 3 times a week. He did this in various ways. The first time, he snuck up behind her with an axe at dinner, startling everyone, not least Margaret herself. After that, it was gunshot, poison, hanging, whatever. Sometimes it was a surprise, sometimes not. Another time, father pierced her heart with a stiletto, but only after telling her what he would do, setting the knife before her on a silver tray and letting her contemplate it for 3 full days and nights. Carolyn would have supposed that the axe would be the worst of the two, but Margaret seemed to take that one in stride. But after a day or so of looking at the knife, though, she started to do that giggles of hers, and after that, she never really stopped. Carolyn sighed. Poor Margaret. But Margaret wasn't really the point. When she was dead, she usually spends a day or two in the Forgotten Land practicing whatever lesson was next in her catalog. Then father would resurrect her. By this point, Carolyn had seen enough of the resurrection to gather that there was a 2-stage process. First, father, or lately, Jennifer, would heal whatever wound had done it for her in the first place. Then, he would call her back into her body. Once, though, he'd taken a break in the middle of all this to go use the bathroom. That time, Margaret's healed body had gotten up and wandered around the room, picking up random objects and saying, "Oh no," over and over again. She seemed to be not all there. Carolyn suspects there that Carolyn suspected that was where the dead ones come from. They had been reanimated, but not resurrected. They looked fairly normal, at least from a distance. They wandered the green lawns and grocery stores convincingly enough, but in every way that really mattered, they were still in the Forgotten Land. They could interact with one another and even with Americans. They exchanged casseroles, filled the cars up with gas, ordered pizza, painted the house. They did these things automatically. It was useful, she supposed. Easier than hiring a lawn service. They could also follow orders if it was something they knew how to do already, which could be handy as well, but they could not take instructions, could not learn new things. Perhaps most important, they serve as a security system. Every so often, a stranger would stumble into Garrison Oaks and go about knocking on doors. Salesmen, lost FedEx drivers, missionaries. For the most part, these outsiders noticed nothing terribly out of the ordinary. Once, though, a burglar actually made it into one of the houses. After he saw what was inside, he couldn't be allowed to return to the outside world. When he tried to sneak out the window, the dead ones were waiting for him. They fell upon him and tore him to bits. Father did to him whatever he'd done to the others, and the erstwhile burglar took his place in one of our house as someone's cousin's Ed, or whomever. Carolyn and the other librarians could come and go as they pleased, though. Hungry, she opened the door of the house Jennifer had pointed and went in. There were 3 of them inside, a little girl about 8, a teenage boy, and an adult woman. "Make me some food," she said to the woman. Lately, she had been focusing on mystical languages. The English felt strange to her tongue. Evidently, it sounded as bad as it felt. She had to repeat herself twice before what was left of the woman understood her. Then it nodded and began pulling things from here and there. A can of fish, white stuff from a jar, and some of green goo that smelled like vinegar. Carolyn sat down at the table next to the little girl. It was a drawing, a family. Mother, father, 2 daughters, a dog. The family stood in a park. Something that might have been the sun, but wasn't blazing down on them. Huge in both the sky and what passed for the little girl's memory, it was far too hot, far too close. As Carolyn watched, the little girl took a yellow crayon and added some flames to the father's back. The red hole of his mouth, she suddenly realized, was a scream. Carolyn stood up fast. The wooden chair scraping across the linoleum. What? Linoleum? Linoleum? She didn't want to be there anymore. She fled to the family room. There, a teenage boy sat slack-jawed in front of a lit box. Do they still grow up, or will he be like this always? She couldn't figure out what he was doing at first. Then it came to her. Television. She smiled a little. I remember television. She sat down on the couch next to the dead boy. He didn't seem to notice. She waved her hand up and down in his field of vision. He turned his head, looked at her without much interest, and pointed at the television. It's time for Transformers. A trickle of drool ran out of the side of his mouth. On the screen, giant robots were shooting each other with rays. A few minutes later, the woman drifted in and handed her a plate of food and a red can that said Coke. Carolyn fell on it, ravenous. The soda was sweet, delicious. She drank it too quickly and it burned her throat. She had forgotten about Coke. The woman watched her eat, a flicker of disquiet crossing her face. "Hello?" she said. "You must be..." It trailed off. Are you one of Dennis's friends? Dennis, is this..." she said to the boy. She broke off. "You're not Dennis," it said to the boy. "Where's Dennis?" Carolyn knew what this meant. When father reanimated the neighborhood, he had assigned them to houses more or less at random. The boy on the couch was not actually the woman's son. Probably the girl wasn't her daughter. The man she laid down at night wouldn't be her. Dennis? Carolyn stood up, grabbed the sandwich, and handed the plate back to the woman. "Thank you." "You're welcome, dear," she said absently. "Dennis?" On the television, a robot screamed. Carolyn strode back to the front of the door and out into the summer sunlight, slamming the door behind her. They would settle down once she's gone. But when she saw what was waiting for her, she wished she had stayed among the dead. Halfway back to the library, black clouds boiled over the face of the sun. The pressure dropped enough to make her eyes pop. The tips of the trees bent nearly double, and the sudden wind. Here and there she heard flat wooden cracks, and the weaker branch gave away. Father was home. Part 2. They all knew from the thunder that he had returned. It was expected that they would meet him at the library. They trickled in and gathered on the lawn. Michael from the forest, Jennifer from the meadows, and so on, all except Margaret. She was with him already. Look, Father said. They all did. Margaret's left arm was badly broken. It hung limp, a spur of bone poking out from the skin. Jennifer moved to help her, but Father waved her away. Why does she not cry out? He spoke lightly, as if talking out to the breeze. No one answered. Why does she not cry out? He asked again. This time his tone was more menacing. Will no one answer me? Surely one of you must know. David mumbled something. What? I can't hear you. I said, Gan-IYA. Carolyn's mind whirled. The word Gan-IYA meant, in a literal sense, the denial of suffering. The phrase itself was kind of meaningless. Suffering existed. Just look around you. But the way he pronounced the word suggested that it was the name for a skill set, some sort of self-anesthesia. Carolyn knew that Father knew all sorts of things about that and about staunching your own wound and healing. But he only teaches that sort of thing to David with a kind of slow boiling horror. She realized what all this was about. If Margaret knew about the Gan-IYA, then someone has been reading outside of her catalog. The young librarian made a sound like dead leaves rustle. I don't really blame Margaret, Father said meditatively. Her studies are often painful. Who could fault her for wanting to alleviate that? No, not Margaret. He tapped his teeth with a fingernail. Who then? Me, David whispered. It was me. You. Father spoke with mock surprise. You? Really? Interesting. Tell me, David, why do you think that I did not teach Margaret of Gan-IYA myself? I don't know. Because I did not wish for her to learn it, Father thundered. All of them flinched at this, all but David. He was Father's favorite and knew it. Still, if you have chosen to teach the craft of Gan-IYA, then surely you have mastered it. I have no idea you were so far along in your studies. I'll admit that I am impressed. He waved his arm, beckoning. Come with me. They all followed, afraid not to. Together, they trailed Father and David down the main street of the neighborhood, past the houses of the dead. And oh, how Carolyn wished then that she had died with them. She had never seen Father so angry. Whatever came next was sure to be very bad. They followed him across the road and up rough steps cut into the earth. There, in the clearing at the top of the hill, they found Father's barbecue grill. Carolyn remembered the thing existed, but had never thought much of it. It was a hollow bronze cast of the shape of a cow, or rather, a bull. It was a bit larger than life size, made of yellowish metal about half an inch thick. When Father had been pretending to be an American, he kept this in his backyard, sometimes at neighborhood picnics or whatever. He would cook in it hamburgers or something pork. He seemed pretty normal back then. She vaguely remembered people, when even her parents, commenting on the unusual grill, but it hadn't been a big deal. Not long after Father took them in, he had the grill moved up to the clearing. She never found out why, but there must have been some sort of reason. The grill was phenomenally heavy. The dead ones gathered around it and heaved as one, sweating and straining in the summer sun. It was surrendered a it surrendered a few slow, painful inch at a time. Its hooves cutting trench in the grass as it moved. Moving it took days and at least a, a couple of reanimation. Looking at it for the first time in years, suddenly Caroline only really thought was only Carolyn's only real thought was, oh right, that thing. She associated she associated mostly with the mostly with the parties of her childhood, hamburgers and barbecues. The pork sandwiches, she remembered, were especially good. Then a dark memory surfaced. Actually, she thought, the last time I saw it was at the feast of my homecoming. She remembers seeing the hatch in the side of the grill open, how the thick hickory smoke poured out. She remembered clamping down on her scream when the smoke cleared and she saw the meat in there. Recognized the delicate carve of Asha's hindquarters. Saw Aisha's severed head staring back at her, skinned and sightless. It occurred to her that the moment had probably been her own UZAN-IYA. Yep, she thought. That was probably it. Up until then, I was still in shock. It also occurred to her that the bull could be used to cook things other than pork. She looked at David. The same thought must have occurred to him. He was staring at the bull with wide, horrified eyes. David was brave, though. He brought himself under control, grinned at Father. Come on, he said. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I didn't mean anything by it. He shadowboxed the way they did sometimes. Father walked to the bull and opened the hatch in its side. The other side was polished bronze. The dead ones kept it shiny, but inside it was black. Black. David, a boy of almost 13 years, held up his hand in surrender. Father pointed inside. Father did not kneel, but he trembled. Oh no. Father raised his eyebrows, waiting for more, but David fell silent. Carolyn's hatred of David was second only to her hatred of Father. But in that moment, she could almost have felt sorry for him. The look in his eyes as he climbed inside the bull brought to mind another Atu phrase, UZAN-IYA, which was the moment when the last hope dies. The bolts Father threw to lock the hatch shut were not bronze, but thick iron, ancient and pitted. Before that moment, it had never occurred to her to wonder what purpose they served. Now she understood. Meat, she realized, don't try to climb out. For the next hour or so, the rest of them brought cut wood up from the stockpile around the neighborhood house, an armful at a time. Father called out to a few of the dead ones, Mother and Dennis among them, and they helped as well. He even pitched in himself. The bull shone golden and polished under the light of the afternoon sun. One by one, they deposit their armful of wood around the base of it. Pine, mostly, fat and sticky with sap. Once Jennifer dropped to her knees sobbing. She was already the kindest of them. Michael, by this point more accustomed to the thinking of beasts than that of men, watched the wood pile up without understanding its implication. Margaret just looked interested. Not long before sundown, father struck a match. They had kindled well. The pile of wood caught quickly, going from a few tongues of flames to a full-on bonfire in a matter of minutes. Smoke came from the bull's nostril, first a trickle, then a stream. They continued feeding the fire through sunset, expecting all of the while to hear him cry out, but David was so very strong. The heat was The heat was such that by dark, Carolyn could approach the bull no closer than 10 feet or so. From there, she pitched her logs onto the flame as best she could. Even then, the heat scorched her hair on her arm. The dead ones continued their slow slog to the fire, oblivious, their skin reddening and blistering. But David was so very strong. It was not until full dark, when the bronze belly of the bull began to glow a dull orange, then he began to shriek. Whenever she thought of father's face, it was by the light of that fire. How rare it was for him to smile. End of part 2. Sorry, give me a sec. Coffee. Yum, yum, yum. Part 3. Just before dawn the next day, there were still small sounds coming from the bull, mostly from the head and neck. Carolyn wondered at this until she noticed the bull's nostrils were actually opens. Flues from those times of coal lay inside. The air from those openings must have seemed relatively cool, the only hint of mercy in all David's world. How's he not dead by now? But of course, it was his catalog. Father had trained him to survive grievous wounds and fight on. Also, there were potions, tonics, injections. Like all of them, David was what father had made. So, however badly he might need to die, he could not. Even so, by noon he had gone mercifully silent. Father kept them feeding the fire until just before dark. David, he said, was still alive. Carolyn didn't doubt that. He really could tell somehow. Father told them to stop feeding the fire shortly after twilight of the second day. It was out by midnight. By morning of the third day, the bull had cooled enough to open, though the metal was still hot enough to leave a blister on Carolyn's forearm when she brushed against it. What was left inside wasn't as bad to look at as she had feared. More than most of them, David was a devoted pupil. His craft was already very strong, second only to father's. He had cooked away most of the bones before he died. She and Michael helped Jennifer take him out. What was left was surprisingly light, dry, and brittle. They put him into a makeshift stretcher made from an ironing board and hauling him down to one of the empty houses. There, they laid him out in a large room in the main floor with dusty, molding furniture piled in one corner. This is what Americans call the living room, Carolyn thought and giggled. Margaret smiled too. The others looked at her strangely. Margaret examined the charred remains of David's skull, his arms pulled into a boxer stance by the heat of the fire, his mouth still open in his last scream. He will be very deep. She turned to Father. May I join him? Help him find his way back? Father shook his head. Let him wander. Carolyn wondered about this. She thought that Margaret meant David would be deep in the Forgotten Lands, which she gathered was where you were both before you were born and after you die. But would he be deep because he had never died before, or because he had died so horribly? Or perhaps Father was glaring at her. When he saw that he had her attention, he glanced significantly. He glanced significantly. She followed his gaze back up the hill to the bull. The question, of course, was outside her catalog. He knows, she thought, despairingly. How can he know what I'm thinking? She put the thought aside, but Father still glared. The pupil of his eyes reminded her of the greasy blackness of the bull's interior, pinned by his stare. For a moment, she imagined herself inside the thing, her ears ringing from the clang as the door swung shut. The only light would be a faint or orange glow visible through the nostril of the heat began to rise. It would be warm at first, then a little uncomfortable, and then, never, she hissed desperately. I'll never think of it again. Never, never. Only then did Father look away. She felt his gaze fall upon her as if it was a physical thing. This is how the field mice feels. This is how the field mice feels. When the shadow of a hawk passes him by. Jennifer, attend me, Father said. Jennifer, whose catalog was healing, bustled to her feet, stood before him. You will bring him back, make him whole again. Up until then, Jennifer had worked the craft of resurrection mostly with animals and those only slightly dead, roadkill, and the likes. I'll try, she said, casting a doubt glance at the corpse. But I try hard, he said. He said it with an edge to his voice. The rest of you help. Bring her what she asked for. Jennifer set to work. She dug 3 big bags of colored powder from her kit and set them around David's body. The rest of them fetched for her. Mostly water, but other things as well. Salt, honey, a goat penis, several feet of 8-track tape. Jennifer chewed the tape in her mouth until it became clear, then spat brownish stuff into David's eye sockets. Carolyn had no idea that this might be in aid of. Remembering Father's glare, she forbade herself to wonder. Jennifer worked all through the night. Margaret sat up with her, though Carolyn and the others rested. Then, when she woke the next morning, David had begun to fill back in. The weathered flesh of his torso had inflated a bit. The hint of pink was now discernible here and there in all the black. By the afternoon of the 4th day, this was true of the skin of his arms, then his legs. That evening, his lungs began distinguishable, then his heart, though it did not yet beat. By the 5th day, he had flesh over most of his body, though it was still black and charred. On the 6th day, he moaned. Jennifer sent Margaret to ask Father if she might do something to ease his pain. Margaret went to ask with a speed that Carolyn found rather touching. She returned with a nod. Jennifer touched David's forehead with a tool she kept in the pouch, and a moment later, his moans ceased. He didn't thank her. Probably couldn't. Not yet. But when he rolled his eyelids towards Jennifer, Carolyn saw gratitude in them. By the morning of the 7th day, he was, to Carolyn's eye, completely healed. Perhaps that wasn't true. Not yet. But it was close. He slept. His chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths. Jennifer was asleep as well, for her first real rest in 5 days. Seeing Carolyn awake, Michael laid a finger against his lips. Carolyn nodded, then sat down near him. Father threw the door open around mid-morning, momentarily blinding Carolyn with the sunlight. He walked over to David and kicked him awake. David snapped to his feet, lightning fast once again, if slightly dazed and blinky. Father said something to him in a language of murder, which Carolyn did not yet speak. David hesitated for a bare instant and then went to his knees. Father asked him something. David answered. She didn't know what was said, but his tone was perfectly humble, perfectly respectful. Then, in Palapi, and there will be no more sharing of catalogs. Father surveyed the room. Is that clear? Am I understood? All of them nodded. Carolyn thought that, without expectation, they all meant it. She certainly did. Father nodded then, satisfied. He left without shutting the door. When he was gone, Margaret went to David. She stood before him shyly, armed first dangling, then hugging herself. Then, surprising them all, she stretched her neck out and bit him on the ear, not quite hard enough to draw blood. You sang so beautifully, she said. She ran away, blushing. I think she likes you, Jennifer said, deadpanned. They all laughed. David got quieter after that, more reserved, less prone to grin and tell jokes. A month or so later, he broke Michael's arm for, he said, cheating on a wager. An archery contest between the two of them. Michael swore he had done no such thing. Jennifer fixed his arm without comment. Michael and David didn't hang around as much after that. The following month, the final Monstruaken paid them a visit. He was one of Father's favorite courtiers. They celebrated the visit with a feast. The pig. Carolyn was relieved to see was dead before they roasted it. The feast was already a big deal, even to her. If nothing else, the food was very good. But this time, she thought the other children's celebration were somewhat muted. The tongues of flame licking the bull's belly reminded them of bad things. Once, just for an instant, out of the corner of her eye, she caught David looking at the fire in a particular way. David did not notice her noticing him, nor did Margaret, standing next to him now. Carolyn did not say UZAN-IYA out loud, or even think it very clearly. She was learning, but for the rest of the night, the phrase was never far from the surface of her thoughts. She recognized the look on David's eyes immediately. She had seen it many times, reflected in the black pools of her own heart. The child who went into the bull had been aggressive and sometimes casually cruel to the rest of them. But David truly loved Father. But Carolyn knew for an absolute certainty that was no longer true. UZAN-IYA, they called it, On the Himalayan steppes 6,000 years ago, UZAN-IYA, the moment the heart turned first to murder. One day, David would move to kill father. She could not guess when the day would be. She knew only that it would come. For the first time, it occurred to her to wonder whether David might be of some use. She pondered on this for many months. End of Interlude 2. Ooh. Before we start chapter 4, Thunder, let's just recap a bit. Let me refresh with coffee and water. Give me 1 second. So, as the Interlude 2 title was called, UZAN-IYA. In the book, it was defined as when an innocent heart turns to murder. Let me just make sure. Let's see, UZAN, which is what? Yeah, quote unquote. The moment when an innocent heart first contemplated the act of murder. Loyal student David, innocent in his thoughts and belief, now contemplates murder. Yes. I mean, after what he suffered through, to share a bit of relief with Margaret in her catalog. Father tortures him in all sense. Oh, also, we now know that Jennifer's catalog is in fact healing without question mark. If you see most fan art, the bronze bull is the symbol, not symbol, but then the usage, right, for this book, and that interlude is just the reason why. It's like the perfect embodiment of his, not embodiment, I guess, a representation of his teaching, his cruelty, and his appearance too, because it was also used in barbecues, as they were mentioned earlier, for barbecues, and the fact that there's a latch to secure it, not for meat, right? As Carolyn was saying earlier, it's like, oh, why would you need a latch for meat that, you know, won't contest, but acts for dual purposes? Oh yeah, give me one more second. I remember when I first read that, it was terrifying, but very imaginative of the author. Oh yeah. Give me one more sec to turn on some lights here and there. Couldn't see the book at first. Okay. Anyways, I've been stalling long enough. Chapter 4, Thunder. Irwin Charles Laffington was an unusual guy. He knew that about himself. For one thing, he insisted that people call him Irwin. He couldn't accept Charles or EC and never ever Chuck. Irwin. As a little kid, he had gone by Chuck for the first 7 years or so. Then he started taking classes 2 years ahead of his age group on account of because he was so smart. And the teacher let his legal name slip. So it was Irwin that the McClusty twins screeched when they ambushed him after class. Irwin! When they pushed his waddled up A+ in algebra through his pinched lips and into his mouth. Irwin! As they worked his jaw. Irwin! As they made him swallow. Irwin! In a casual, almost friendly tone, while they beat him until he smiled and said thank you. After he grew up into a badass, it crossed his mind to go back and pay the McCluskey twins a visit. But in the end, he decided against it. They had taught him a valuable life lesson at a young age. On a balance, he was grateful. Irwin had fight in him. As luck will have it, he grew up to be a big motherfucker. Irwin was what the crowd chanted when he ground his way through the defensive line and scored the winning touchdown at the homecoming game in his junior year. Irwin was what they called him at Fort Bragg from the day he enlisted. Well, almost. Right up to the day he retired. Part of what was the sergeant major or command sergeant major was a fucking mouthful, and he didn't want to inflict that on his men. But mostly it was because he liked telling officers to call him Irwin. Like the way some of them got a little flicker in their eye when he said it, but they did it anyways. Irwin wasn't in the army anymore. 13 years in, just after his third tour in Afghanistan, he decided he'd killed enough people. He wasn't post-traumatic or anything. He still loved his men. He still thought the enemies were a bunch of assholes. He just done with it. That was a Tuesday. He'd seen an Apache gunship basically disintegrate a 16-year-old knucklehead. It was the right thing to do. He was grateful to the men flying the Apache for doing it. The kid was toting a Dragonval sniper rifle. A little banged up but perfectly serviceable. And he probably wasn't going into the hills to hunt goats. Given the same criticism, he cheerfully had massacred a little bastard himself. He just didn't want to be in those circumstances anymore. So a little while longer, he took a discharge and went out into the world. There, he ended up teaching middle school art. That was some soothing shit right there. Not exactly what he was expecting to do, but it turned out he had nothing against tempera paint. He actually kind of liked making clay pots. What's more, he was surprised to discover that he was good at it, and the kids loved him. They respected him too. Not once did he ever had to raise a hand to even a single one of them little bastards. Truth to tell, most of them seemed a little scared of him. Teachers too, for the matter. And the school board, once or twice. Did they see smoldering bodies piled 10 deep when they looked in his eyes? Was he flanked by ghosts when he walked down the hall? He didn't know. But once they realized he wasn't going to stab them in the face or blow them up, they relaxed. Well, they relaxed a little bit. Most of them. After a while, he relaxed too. He loved the kids. He allowed himself to love them in a way he hadn't thought he was capable of anymore. When he got back from the war, his ability to love was in serious doubt. All he had to do was take one look at the smoking ruins of his marriage, or maybe ask his half forgotten family. In the civilian world, the volume was a lot lower, but he was still shouting. He knew that. He just couldn't seem to do anything about it. It crossed his mind to eat a shotgun, but after he thought about it, he decided to take a chance. Really, what did he have to lose? So one time when he caught this little dude named Dashawn Morning Flower Mercedes, he would never forget the name. Why the fuck would you do that to a kid? He caught little Dashawn eyeing this little plastic dish of macaroni and cheese, and his desk the same way the skinnies in Somalia had looked at his MREs. He took the kid aside thinking maybe he was poor and his mom was a junkie or some sad shit like that. Who the fuck couldn't come up with the money for a goddamn sandwich? This is America, for Christ's sakes. But it turned out little Dashawn's mom had plenty of money. She was a phlebotomist or some shit. Money wasn't the problem. The problem was that the kid's dad was in some kind of hippie religion, and he taught little Dashawn about non-violence and talking through your problems and all that other crap. Erwin had pointed out what a dumb idea this was to the parent-teaching conference, and the crazy fuck brought up Gandhi. Clearly, the man was insane. The little Dashawn was suffering for it. Erwin himself, no stranger to the problem of insane parents, took pity on him. It turned out he wasn't a nerd or anything like that. He's just been handicapped by poor upbringing. All he needed was a clue. Once Erwin figured that out, he muttered a prayer of thanks to God. He didn't really believe in and set about providing some said clue. He taught Dashawn how to kick the other little bastards in the balls, bloody their nose, sneak up behind them, and clap both hands over their ears. All the basics. Actually, he might have gone a bit far with the last one. Dashawn overdid it, and one of the other mini dudes ended up with a little bit of permanent hearing loss. But after that, everyone liked Dashawn, and no one stole his lunch money. So basically, it was a happy ending. Little Dashawn moved on to high school that following year. Erwin figured he'd seen the last of him. But then one rainy day in December, he headed out to the mailbox in front of his duplex where he was staying. He remembered it perfectly. It was the 18th, a Saturday. School was out on winter break. The people next door, the Michelsons, had 2 little kids, and they were all decorating their tree. It was 2 in the afternoon. He was on his 8th scotch. He could hear Christmas carols through the walls. The one about Good King, Wenceslas, Jingle Bells, Grandma got run over by a fucking reindeer. That shit didn't bother him. He wasn't jealous of the Michelsons. He was happy for them. He didn't feel like he fucked up in life, given getting apocalyptically drunk by himself was just the sort of thing bachelors did around Christmas. Also, he wasn't thinking of the shotgun in the corner in his closet. at all. Then he opened the mailbox and Mirabel Visu. Little Deshaun had sent him a Christmas card. He took the card out of the mailbox with a trembling hand, opened the envelope, and read it standing right there at the mailbox. It says, Dear Erwin, Merry Christmas. I know it's not cool, but I wanted to send you this card so you know all is good with me. High school sucks, but it's also pretty cool, if you know what I mean. Probably it wouldn't have been probably it wouldn't have been if I hadn't met you. Wanted you to know I knew that. Wanted to say thanks. I'd invite you over for Xmas dinner, but I think my dad is still mad. Deshaun. P.S. I got me a girlfriend. That's her in the picture. Hot, ain't she? When he was done reading it, everyone went back into his half of a duplex and wept. The only time in his adult life he would ever do so. He wept for a good solid hour, then poured the rest of the scotch down the drain and turned the TV and watched Charlie Brown. Before he went to bed, he folded the card up and put it in his wallet. It would be there until he died. Not long after that, he felt better, more like himself, more about to do the sort of work he was good at. He resigned his teaching job at the end of the school year. Most everyone was relieved, though they were too polite to say anything, or nervous, whatever. Part 2. Now, on a sunny October morning, with the last breath of Virginia's summer hanging in the air, Erwin aimed his rental, a shiny little Ford Taurus, at an empty spot in the parking lot and slid to a stop with a spray of gravel. This drew glares from a couple of cops smoking and swapping lies around the corner of the jail. Erwin grinned at them and waved. He didn't give a fuck. He got out of the car and looked around, then spat in the general direction of the sign reading County Jail. He called out to the two guys sucking on their Marlboros. That shit will kill you, you know. Then tipped his hat and grinned at them. Just saying. The younger cops peered over the top of the sunglasses at Erwin like they couldn't believe what he was seeing. The older one laughed. I'll keep it in mind, he said. Actually, Erwin was wrong. The cops had less than 2 hours to live, but smoking would not be a factor. The lobby of the jail was about like every other government building built in the last 20 years. Cinder block walls painted light tan or dark pale or something like that. Linoleum floors, cheap but damn shiny. And a gray water fountain that dispenses lukewarm water that tastes like piss. Erwin drank it anyways. He was thirsty. He had worse. Looking around the lobby, he counted at least half a dozen meth heads in a various stage of strung out, two drunks, and a red-headed kid who, in Erwin's opinion, was a fucking schizophrenic. He walked up to the window under the sign that said, Visitors Register Here, and took out his badge. Yeah, I'm Erwin, he began. I'm with Homeland Security. I'm here to see the attendant, a pudgy man in a green uniform that said Virginia Department of Correction in one pocket and Rogers on the other, didn't look up. Fill this out, he said. Pushed a clipboard through the slot in the glass. Can I get... Fill it out, said the deputy. Then we'll talk. Erwin sighed. The form ran 3 pages long back and front. By the time he was done, the goodish line had formed ahead of him. A goodish line had formed ahead of him. He took his place behind a fat lady with dirty feet and a skinny girl about 16 with a bad Linrid Skyward tattoo on her back. Erwin was little surprised to see the tattoo. Ronnie Van Zant had been in his grave 10 years or more when the kid was born, but he reflected, for a certain demographic, Skyneard is gonna be timeless, like Elvis and the Virgin Mary. To whatever degree such a demographic exists, these two were definitely part of it. The fat lady had a kid named Billy who got caught with a truckload of stolen cheese. Cheese? It emerged that this was Billy's third time receiving stolen goods, so he was looking at a good long stretch. Mama winked steadily and noisily, saying things like, I raised them boys right, every so often. The skinny girl doled out Kleenex. Every so often, she'd say something like, I just don't know what he was thinking, and patting her belly protectively. Irwin guessed that there would be another doomed idiot to take Billy's place in the trailer park in 6 months or so. 15 sniffle minutes later, he was back at the window. He didn't bother trying to talk, just passed the form and waited for the verdict. As a 13-year veteran of Army bureaucracy, he was pretty sure he filled it out properly, but with a certain species of assholes, you could never really be sure. The pudgy cop scanned the form carefully, all 3 pages, back and front. After a moment, he nodded. Looks good, he said, clearly disappointed. I'll never need to see 2 forms of identification officer. Oh, I'll need to see 2 forms of identification officer. He broke off and squinting at the form. Leftington? Irwin Leffington? He looked up for the first time. That's me, Irwin said. He held his badge up. You're not the Irwin Leffington, are you? Ah, fuck, he thought. Here we go. If he had one regret in life, which he did, it was letting the fuckers write a book about him. It seemed harmless at the time, but the book was what led to the movie. When the movie came out, it was basically all she wrote. Probably not. Command Sergeant Major Irwin Leffington, B Company, 2nd Battalion. Irwin just looked at him. For the first time in a good long while, the taste of dust and Cordine came back to him. He tried to cling to the image of little Deshawn, to the Christmas card, but all of a sudden, he was drowning. 2nd Battalion of the 15th? Not for a while, Irwin said. He spoke very softly. If we could just... My brother is Jim Rogers, the fat guy said. The fat guy said. I don't know. Wrong emphasis there. The fat guy said. Irwin looked up at that, no longer drowning. How is Sergeant Rogers? He's better, sir. He was rough going for a while, but he's doing well now. He just had a son, born last May. Don't call me sir. Then, after a moment, how's his leg? He's getting around now. Anyways, took the VA for a while and get it adjusted right. The news that Roger was going well helped a little. Your brother is a good man, he said. You tell him I asked after him. Now, if we could, sir, he told us about you, the fat deputy said. He told us what you'd done. Irwin shuffled his feet. Shit like this always makes him uncomfortable. The silent stretch. Your brother is a good man, he repeated. My brother says the same about you. No, that ain't true. He says you're a great man. He says you're about the best soldier who has ever worn a uniform. A certified badass to boot. The fat deputy was looking at him with worship in his eyes. His voice trembled and he spoke. He says, you saved his life, and everybody... Thanks, Derwin growled, then calmer. All that? Yeah, that was overhyped. Your brother says different, sir. Then something horrible occurred to him. I'm sorry about making you fill out the form. If I'd known it was you, I'd never have done that. His lip trembled. I'm really sorry. It's all right. Who you here to see? A guy named Steve Hudson. The deputy's face darkened. The cop killer? What do you want with him? Erwin Clever saw his way out. Can't talk about it, he lied. National security. For real? Oh, yeah. He could see that Roger's brother believed this completely. That made him feel a little bad. Not as bad as he would have felt continuing the conversation, but bad. Yeah, it's all real fucking classified shit. Tell Sergeant Rogers I asked after him. I will, sir. He hesitated. Could I maybe get your autograph? Erwin weighed his options. One of them was to beat the guy a little bit unconscious. That worked sometimes. Usually, after they get an autograph, they'll let go, though. Plus, the lobby was full of security cameras. Yeah, sure. The deputy passed out a clipboard with a blank sheet of typing paper. Erwin signed it, passed it back. Roger's brother took the autograph and put it in a drawer in tremble hands. I'm going to have it put in the chapel. The chapel? Yeah, visitation room is full unless you want to wait. Oh, I'm going to put you in the chapel. The chapel, yeah, the visitation is full unless you want to wait. The chapel is fine. The toilet would have been fine. He just wanted out. Anyways, from Roger's brother and the endless parade of awful shit that lurked trembling and eager just beneath the surface of his babble. And the part 2. Let me just skim ahead. There is about confirmed 5 parts. Okay. Part 3. Roger's brother searched Erwin's bag and took his weapon, but let him keep the laptop and the manila folder. As they searched, another deputy skidded around whispering, so Erwin wasn't surprised when a different guy, a sheriff's lieutenant no less, handed him a guest ID and walked him down the long hall in the chapel. He's probably the highest ranking guy in the building, Erwin thought, bracing himself. Sure enough, when they got to the steel door, I read that book that you wrote. I mean, that they wrote about you. Well, mostly about what you did and how you pronounce the place. Natanz? Erwin said. Is it really true that... Nope, Erwin said. He could go weeks at a time without anyone recognizing him, but there were also days where it seemed like everyone he ran into, with even the tiniest connection to military, turns out to have read the book, or seen the movie, or the thing on the History Channel. Today was shaping up to be one of those. It's total bullshit. Maybe I should have grown a beard. Oh, I didn't read much, but Erwin strode into the chapel, shut the door behind him. Inside, he looked around. His job carried him into the occasional jail, but this was his very first jail chapel. It was maybe 20 feet on the side and windows. It smelled of paint. He had expected rows of metal folded chairs. It was the kind of building, but inside he saw 6 concrete benches sat into the floor, each wide enough for 3 to 4 guys. Interestingly, there was no cross in sight. Politically correctness, maybe? The only real feature was a plain paint podium at the front of the room and a framed painting on the wall. With nothing better to do and not eager to settle his middle-aged ass onto the concrete bench, Erwin walked over to check the painting out. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. It had the simple blocky representationism of medieval iconography and prison tattoos. A small man with a nut brown skin. Jesus? Mohammed? Other? Stood in the center of the picture. The sun burned down behind him, leaving his face in shadow. He held out his hand, blessing the motley array of people and animals gathered in the light. The holy dude and his sup- supplicant were surrounded by darkness. The chapel doors opened. A middle-aged guy in khakis and a grease-spotted Izot walked in. You Leffington? Call me Irwin. Yeah. I'm Larry Dorn. Yeah, hi. Where's the kid? Dorn was Stephen Hawkins' public defender. He'll be along. I asked them to give me a few minutes first. I wanted to talk to you. Sure, Irwin said. Be happy to. This was a lie. They had spoken on the phone a couple of times. Dorn came across a sort of sack of shit of in Irwin's opinion. But he controlled access to Hodson's kid. While Dorn looked the paper over, Irwin occupied himself with staring at the painting. At first glance, the surrounding darkness was completely black, but from the right angle, you could see that it wasn't. Not really. The paint was layered. If you looked at it right, you could see figures in the darkness. Devils, maybe. And everything looked in order, Dorn said. Yeah, for what it's worth, I don't give much of a shit about your boy. Only reason I'm talking to you is that you might know something about another case. What a relief, Dorn said. His voice fairly dripped with sarcasm. Excuse me. Not really fond of him? Nope. I knew Detective Miner. Our daughters play together sometimes. That's going to be a problem for you, defending him. Dorn shrugged. What's to defend? They found him passed out drunk at Miner's dining room table. The gun that killed Miner was in his hands. It had his prints on it. Dorn looked like he wanted to strangle his own client. Ain't looking really good for the defense. Just his prints? No. Miner's too, and a thumbprint on the light switch trigger from third party we haven't made yet. Yeah, we have, Irwin thought. You just don't know it yet. Anything else? Like what? Like anything. Thorn pursed his lip for a moment, considering. Then he shrugged. Yeah, there was this. He rooted around the folder and handed over a stack of 8x10 glossies of crime scene. Lot of guts on that china cabinet, Irwin said. We know who they belong to? Carolyn, maybe? Or maybe Lisa? We still waiting for the lab works. It was a shotgun. Wait, it was a shotgun. What did it, though? The same one? Dorn popped his eyebrows. Good eye. You forensic? Not really. He had killed a lot of people with shotguns. That there's a piece of lung. Looks like it ain't the victim's. His lung was mostly in the kitchen. And this Steve kid is up and walking around, so it's probably ain't his either. You guys wondered about that? Not really, no. What are you getting at? Irwin sighed. How'd this guy make it through law school? Anybody gone looking for this mystery chick of his? Who? Dorn said. The one at the bar he made up? I thought you had a witness who saw the two of them together. We do. But that's all we have. If she was ever at Miner's house, she didn't leave any fingerprints, any footprints, not so much of a stray hair. Do we know how hard it is? Do you know how hard it is to walk through someone's house and not leave any trace? I don't know. Pretty hard, I guess. Thing is, though, she did leave a print. Dorn's face clouded. You kidding me? Nope. Which? The one on the light switch? It wasn't in IAFIS, Dorn said, meaning the FBI's Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System. That's right, Irwin said. It wasn't. He was going to let the phrase hang there, pregnant with all sorts of sinister implication about the information he has access to. But then the door to the chapel changed. What? Clanged open. This disappointed Irwin. It spoiled the fucking moment. A different deputy walking in, clutching the skinny white guy with short brown hair. Irwin recognized Steve Hudson from his mugshot. The deputy shoved him at Irwin the way you push a sack of trash into the landfill. Irwin looked at him. Is that him? Is that all there is? He wasn't quite a kid, not anymore. Early 30s, maybe. He was an orange jump. He was in an orange jail jumpsuit, faded and fraying at the edges. No visible tattoos. He didn't look like a junkie, but his eyes jumped around, alert, maybe a little shell-shocked. Dorn nodded at the guard. Thanks. I gotta lock you in, Mr. Leffington, sir, the guard said. I'm really sorry. I gotta say, though, it's an honor to... It's no problem, Dorn said. Thanks. Looking thwarted, the guard shut the door. The Hodgson kid immediately starting asking Dorn about someone named Petey. Whether Dorn had heard anything about him. Who the fuck is Petey? He made a mental note, but didn't interrupt. Dorn looked at the guy like he was a fucking idiot. Don't you have bigger things to worry about? Irwin could see desperation in Steve's eyes, but he kept it out of his voice. Yeah, I know. I'm just wondering if... Yeah. Okay, fine. Your friend called. He said he picked up your dog. That's all I got. Hobson nodded, smiled a little. Tension visibly slid off him. He shuffled over to one of the concrete benches, his thin blue prison slippers scuffing against the shiny linoleum. The monocles didn't leave him much room to move. What? Oh, not monocle. God dang it. The manacles? The manacles didn't leave him much room to move. Up for murder 1, and all he cares about is his dog. When he got close enough, Irwin stood up and held out his hand. Steve looked startled, but after a moment he reached out to the length of the chain and gave Irwin a little shake. I'm Irwin, Irwin said. Steve Hodgson. He thought about it for a second. Pleased to meet you. Isn't quite right, but I'll admit I'm curious. What can I do for you, Mr. It's Irwin, Irwin said. Always call me Irwin. Steve's eyes narrowed at this, probably wondering if I'm playing good cop. I was hoping I could ask a couple of questions. You mind if I call you Steve? Sure, whatever. Steve sat on one side of the bench. I don't suspect you got a cigarette, do you? I'd drop kick a baby Jesus for a Marlboro. Sorry, I don't smoke. Want a dip? Irwin noticed that Steve took a couple of extra steps so that he could sit with his back to the wall. Irwin had done the same thing. Steve considered, I'll pass. Thanks, though. I read your case file, Irwin said. If what you say is true, sounds like you got truly fucked over. Steve gave him a wary smile. Yeah, oddly enough, I had the same thought. Any idea why she wanted to do such a thing? Again, Steve looked startled. You believe me? Don't know yet. You ain't said much. Steve gave Dorn a resentful look. Dorn hadn't made a secret of his fact that he thought the woman Dorn hadn't made a secret of the fact that he thought the woman, if she existed at all, was awfully convenient. Up until now, no one seemed interested. Not to answer your question, no. I have no idea why she wanted to do something like this to me, or anything else for that matter, but something flickered in his eyes as he said it. You got a clean conscience, don't you? Steve gave him a long, appreciating look. You don't miss much, do you? No, I don't have a clean conscience. I did something a long time ago. A friend of mine got hurt. Probably his parents hated me enough to do something like that. If they would have thought of it. But Celia died of a heart attack 7 years ago, and Martin shot himself the year after. That's a fucking sad story, Erwin said. You making fun of me? I'm not, Erwin said. For what it's worth, I get it. I got plenty of shit I wish I could take back. Keep me up some nights. Steve studied him for a moment and then relaxed a bit. Okay, sorry. You think this Caroline chick has anything to do with that? Steve brow wrinkled. I don't see how she could, he said, but there's a whole lot about her I don't understand at all. Why don't you start at the beginning, Erwin said. Tell me everything you remember. Take your time. I got all day. End of part 3. Ooh. Part 4. Then I heard a guy behind me, Steve was saying. He had been speaking for almost an hour. He had a good memory for visual details, less so for the exact wording of conversation. His description of the woman, funky attire, bicycle shorts, and leg warmers was both interesting and surprisingly detailed. Also, in Erwin's professional opinion, it had the ring of truth. If this guy was lying, he didn't know it. He simply had no idea what had been done to him, or why. It made Erwin feel fucking sad. Then the guy, Minor, he said something along the lines of, "You're under arrest," he said. He said it at least twice. He acted kind of weird, like he wasn't sure what was going on. In a daze, you know. What happened next? Erwin asked. Steve looked down. Erwin noticed that he avoided looking at the chains around his ankle. I honestly don't remember. I remember thinking, oh shit, he's got a gun. And I can kind of picture his face. So I must have turned around. But my next clear memory is waking up on the floor. I had no idea where I was. And some guy was hollering at me. That would be Detective Jacobson, Dorn said. He and Minor were friends. They were supposed to go out fishing that morning. He discovered Minor's body and performed the initial arrest. Thanks, Erwin lied. He didn't give a fuck about Jacobson. He tapped his pen against the concrete bench, thinking, so you deny killing him, Minor? Does it matter? Probably not, Erwin said, but I'm curious. I guess I do. Deny it, I mean. You guess? Dorn said, incredulous. Steve shrugged. Like I said, I don't remember. The last clear memory I have, he was alive. When I came to the next morning, he was dead. I had no grudge against the guy, he sighed. I really wish I just gone home, gone to bed. Don't know if it would have helped him much, but I'd probably be at home with my dog. You said she should have killed him anyways. Wait, let me try that line again. You think she'd have killed him anyways? Dude, Steve was truly epically sincere, with true epic sincerity. I got no fucking idea. Erwin waited for more, but that was it. He's empty, he considered. Okay, he said for a moment. I think you've been pretty straight with me. I appreciate that. A lot of guys I talk to, they lie just because they like the sound of it. So I'm going to spare you my dance moves. I got some information about this woman. Not much, but some. Some that might be of use in your case, maybe. Steve blinked. Go on. Thorne looked up from his papers. I'm fairly sure that the woman you met is named Carolyn Sapolsky. And what you said dovetails dovetails with the little bit we know about her. Steve looked attentively, maybe even hopeful. He didn't speak. I'm listening, Thorne said. Like I said, I work for Homeland Security. I'm a special agent. It's kind of a FBI special agent. It's kind of like an FBI special agent, except we ain't got to wear suits if we don't want to. Today, he was a it, he was in a gray t-shirt and a navy blue zip-up hoodie. The jean had nowhere had wait. The jean he had on were the same size the one he wore on his high school graduation 30 years ago. So, what do you do exactly? It depends. A lot of times I just follow up on the interesting coincidence. How do you mean? Well, today Homeland Security is tied into pretty much everything. You know you know that, right? Phone records, internet searches, library books, bank stuff, everything. All that goes into big air conditioned room that they got up in Utah. What comes out the other end is a pile of weird coincidence that might be of interest to a guy like me. So, like, if the same dude buys one bag of fertilizers at 15 or 20 different Home Depots, the system might notice that. You follow? I guess. Or like in this case, say a cop writes a report. They forever they forever writing reports, poor fucks. In addition to all the normal shit that happens with it, prosecutors and lawyers and dust gathering, there's also a copy that goes into the machine in Virginia. And on that last run of the cases that pops up was mine, says Steve suddenly, eager. You find something that clears me? Nope. Yours didn't get picked up. Nothing unexplained there. The connection that ended up on my desk had to do with a bank robbery. A real fucking weird bank robbery. Weird how? Part of it was the size of the hole, Erwin said. Most robberies, the guy gets 10, maybe 15,000. A lot of times it was not even that much. But this one was more like 300,000. 300,000, 327,000, Steve said. Ish. Quoting the amount his mystery woman had said was in the duffel bag. Erwin nodded. Actually, yeah. Same thought crossed on my mind anyways. That's a pretty successful robbery. A lot more successful than most of them. It's unusual, so the computer took an interest. Kicked it up to me. One thing that might have explained it was that people who did it were trained. Steve wrinkled his forehead. Trained? You mean like government trained? Believe it or not, yeah. KGB ran a course on that very thing back in the 70s. Insurgent training or some shit. We did too, a part of the Green Beret Q Corps. Not anymore. But a lot of know-hows are still floating around. Anyways, that's why I got called in. I get one like this every couple of months. Usually it turns out to be nothing. That's true. That's true here as well. At least that's what I don't have. At least in that we don't have any reason to think Miss Sabosky is into any kind of terrorist shit. What's less clear is exactly why she is involved in. I mean, the bank teller helped her do the fucking robbery. What's up with that? What do you mean? Dorn asked. Orwin shrugged. Just what I said. At around 3 p.m., Miss Sapolsky, your Carolyn, and another chick, identity unconfirmed, walked into Oak Street Branch, Midwest Regional in downtown Chicago. We got them on the lobby camera. They waited in line like a good little customer for over 3 minutes. When their turn came, the two of them approached the teller, a Ms. Irwin squinted at his notes. Amrita Krishnamurti. The unidentified woman spoke with her calmly for 37 seconds. Then, well, never mind. Watch it yourself. Irwin fired up his laptop. He punched up Microsoft something or other, spent a couple of seconds closing out porn, then pressed play. Security camera footage, he said, from the bank. Steve set the laptop on one of the concrete benches. Thorne watched over his shoulder. Why is she dressed like that? Thorne asked. Carolyn looked more or less reasonable, if a bit dated. Jeans and a man buttoned down barefoot, but the other woman was in a bathrobe and a cowboy hat. Ain't got a fucking clue, Irwin said. My first thought was meth, but I don't think that's it. She looks too sleepy. Plus, she still has all her teeth, Thorne agreed. Could be LSD, though. Irwin and Steve looked at him. Thorne shrugged. About half the people who got booked tripping on acid are wearing bathrobe. It's like a thing. They considered this for a few moments. Then Irwin nodded back at the laptop. It's about to get good. The woman in the bathrobe was speaking to Amrita Krishnamurti. Carolyn handed her a blue duffel bag, like one of yours, like the one you use to take stuff to the gym. Miss Krishnamurti motioned to the other two tellers and they gathered around to listen. The bathrobe woman spoke for a few more seconds, then touched each of them on the cheek. Then the tellers split up and started filling the bags of money. They worked quickly, slowing only to toss out die packs on the occasional bill. Are those the marked bills? Thorne asked. Irwin nodded. The video ran for just under 3 minutes. When it was over, Steve handed the computer back. They all help, Thorne said. Yeah. Irwin bit back to the urgent salute Captain Obvious. He needed Thorne. They did. That Krishnamurti lady was the, branch manager. She worked there for 12 years. The other two had been there for a year each. None of them was fixing to go bankrupt or any shit like that. And they couldn't have got the job in the first place if they had criminal records. But they were just awfully eager to fill that bag, don't you think? Thorne nodded. It's weird. Irwin thought, but did not say. Maybe a little bit like a guy who kept his nose clean for 10 years all of a sudden deciding to commit burglary and kill a cop. Or maybe not. But he'd bring that up later. Yeah, I thought so too. So I went and talked to them a little bit. They seemed nice enough. They all remembered where the alarm button were, didn't panic or anything like that. But not a one of them pushed one. Did they say why? Not at first. They lowered up. But once I convinced them they weren't going to jail, one of the younger ones talked to me. She said she didn't set off the alarm because I was just too busy hunting for die packs and radio transmitters. Real matter of fact. See? I asked her why she'd do such a thing and she said she had no idea. I'm pretty sure I believe her. Irwin gave a weary smile. I'll be honest, I'm fucking stumped. That's why I came here. Oh, this. I'll be honest. I'm fucking stumped. That's why I came here. How do you mean? Steve asked. I was hoping you might have some bright ideas. Me? Irwin nodded. You spent more time with the lady than anybody. Anything about the video jumped out at you? Jogged your memory like? Irwin gave him a minute to think about it. His eyes drifted once again to the fucked up painting. The shapes of darkness were black on black, but you could almost. You don't think the teller are in on it? Nah, Irwin said. I don't. I did what I could for them. They lost their jobs, but I don't think they're going to be a trial. There's going to be a trial. Bleh. I don't think there's going to be a trial. And you're sure that the woman in the video was Carolyn, the prince match. How did you get her name? Matching prints would give you a connection between the two cases, but for her name, you'll need something else. Smart kid. Birth records, Irwin said. Hospital. Dorn's eye narrowed. I didn't know there was such a technical possibility. Irwin shrugged. Learn something every day, don't you? I'm Big Brother, more or less. I've got access to all sorts of shit you wouldn't think. We couldn't find much of her, though. And our computer guys are pretty good. What do they call them? Data miners? Irwin said, playing dumb. Don't publish papers on data mining. I mean, he published papers on data mining. I heard of it, Dorn said. Irwin was pretty sure he was lying. Whatever. Point is, them nerds just about always come back with something. Not this time, though. I'm about convinced they came up dry because at a certain age, there's nothing out there to find on Ms. Sabosky. What do you mean, past a certain age? Steve asked. Well, up until she turned 8 or so, she showed up in the records about like any other child. Birth records, shots, school. He rummaged around the folder and dug out an 8x10, slid it across the table. That's Mrs. Gillespie, second grade teacher, Carolyn in the back row. Steve examined the picture. Irwin waited for a light bulb to go on, but it didn't. You notice anything else in the picture? Should I? Maybe not. I've had a lot longer to look at it than you, and I might be seeing things, but take a look at the girl in the second row, third from the right. She remind you of anybody? It took Steve another couple of seconds. Is it the kid? Looks like the other lady in the bank robbery. The one who did all the talking. Same nose, same shape of her face. Yeah, Irwin said. I thought so too. The kid's name is Lisa Garza. We're trying to find out what she's been up to the last quarter century or so. He gave them a level gaze. Haven't found anything on her. Either. Absolutely nothing. Dorn let out a low whistle. Seeing that they were ready, Irwin dug out the piece de resistance. It was a photograph from a newspaper. The caption underneath it said, Beating the summer heat. Carolyn Sapolsky, 7, takes her turn on the water slide. A grinning girl with a missing front tooth was sliding down a long piece of plastic. Haloed by the sparkling spray of water in the background, a small crowd of kids milled around, waiting for their turn. What about that one? He asked. You notice anything? He broke off. He sniffed the air. He couldn't identify the smell at first, and then he could. Blood. All of a sudden, he was back in Afghanistan. He reached out for an M16 that wasn't there. In the distance, he heard a woman scream, then a gunshot, then 2 more gunshots, and a deep booming laugh, then screaming. End of chapter 4. Ooh. I like this detective work. And was it Hobson getting more time? Interesting. Quick 5-minute break and we'll carry on to part 5. All right, be right back. Okay. Part 5. "30 seconds later, Erwin heard keys clanging at the lock. Oh, fuck. The door swung open, and Sergeant Rogers' brothers kneeling on the floor, head hang low, cheeks streaking with tears. He pointed at Steve with his left hand. His right, Erwin saw, was broken in at least 2 places. That's him, he said. Please, I got a baby. Erwin just had time to register the words when Roger's head exploded. He crumbled the rest of the way to the floor, his short, dumb life mercifully over. Then the craziest looking asshole Erwin had ever seen stepped over the body into the chapel. He was a white guy, tall, muscular, and a healthy specimen, quote unquote. As they had said back in the day, Erwin's first thought was that the guy had done himself up in red body paint, like one of those one of those tribes in Cambodia. No, not body paint, blood. He was covered in blood from head to toe. Here and there, bits of meat were stuck on him as well. A couple of feet of someone's small intestine dangled from his shoulders. The big guy was spinning a pyramid-shaped weight on the end of a long chain, and at the other end of the chain was a machete-sized knife, mounted on a yellow metal shaft. Is that bronze? Also, what the fuck? At first, Erwin refused to believe what his eyes were telling him. But the guy was in fact wearing a tutu. Erwin thought. There's something you don't see every day. Steve, the big guy said. His eyes tracked back and forth between Erwin, Steve, and Dorn, reminding Erwin of the forward-mounted gun on an Apache. He had a strange accent, one Erwin couldn't place. The S sound more like a ish, and he dragged his E's out too long. Ish, Steve, said Dorn. Oh, whoops, said Dorn. Steve, said Dorn. You're looking for Steve? Don't counselors, Erwin said. Oh, don't, counselor, Erwin said. The big guy's eyes locked onto Dorn. Steve? Question mark. That's him, Dorn said, pointing to Steve. The guy gave Dorn a big smile. His teeth was brown. Steve? Dorn nodded his head with a comical enthusiasm, looking for a moment more like a headbanger than an attorney. Yeah, he said, jabbing his fingers in the air in Steve's direction. That's him! Counselor! I don't think... Quick as a panther, the big guy was at Steve's side. He put an arm around him, stroked his cheeks with a blade of the knife. Erwin's professional eyes noted that the blade was hand forged. Don't see that much either. It looked very sharp. Steve? Yeah, said Steve. That's me. The big guy continues running his knife up and down Steve's cheek, not quite hard enough to draw blood. Then, with a moment so fast that Erwin's eyes could not track it, the weighted end of the chain smashed out and obliterated Thorn's lower jaw. It literally disappeared. Probably part of it was smashed back into his throat, but the other bits scattered hither and yon. Good boy, the big guy said to Steve. You come. From the look in his eyes, Dorn realized that something had happened, but not exactly what. He reached up and probed tenderly at the bottom half of his face. At the time he realized something was missing, the first drop of blood began to rain down on his shirt. His eyes widened. "Ah," he said. "Ah, ah." He began bouncing up and down on the bench like a little kid who needs to use the bathroom. "Ah." Both Steve and the big guy were looking at Thorn. Steve in horror. The big guy with a slight amused smile that brought out his dimples. After a moment of this, he began to intimidate Dorn's bouncing. He glanced at Steve and Irwin the way a man will when he laughed among friends. He pointed at Dorn and said, "Og, og." Steve didn't seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on the ruin of Dorn's face. The big guy's smile faded a bit. He turned to Irwin. He didn't like what he saw there either. His smile disappeared. He shrugged. A split second later, the spear on the other end of the chain flashed out and buried itself into the hilt in Dorn's eye socket. The pointy end of the blade poked out from the back of Dorn's skull, yellow and bloody. After an interval just long enough for Steve to register the fine silver chain running from the hilt to the big guy's hand, it flashed back again. Dorn fell forward, his head hitting the concrete, benched with a solid clunk. Blood and aqueous humor leaked from his eyes and began puddling. The silence seemed very loud. The big guy savored the looks on his face for a moment. He gave Irwin a wink, then began to spin the weight end of the chain again. Irwin realized he was just about to die. Then his mind, his clever little mind, which had been so good to him over the years, came through again. He looked at the big guy, ridiculous dress, brown loafers with the toes cut out, purple tutu, a tutu, the fuck, flak jacket, probably Israel, and red tie. He thought of the woman who had done the bank robbery in a bathrobe and a cowboy hat. He says, "You wouldn't happen to know a chick named Carolyn, do you?" The big guy raised his eyebrow in surprise. "Carolyn?" The rotation of the chain slowed just a little. Irwin, whose instinct had been honed to exquisite sharpness through a decade-long association with murderous men, thought, the trick now is not to show panic. If he sees fear, he will execute him. "Yeah," he said casually. "Carolyn, Lisa too." "Was say Carolyn?" "Eh?" He put his hand to his ear. "Say again, chum." "What say Carolyn?" He wiggled the knife with emphasis. With a knot in his stomach that reminds him of the one and only time he had gone deep sea fishing and hooked a bigum, Irwin said, "Oh yeah, Carolyn and me go way back. If she told you one time, she told me 1,000. Irwin, if you ever need anything at all, you just say my name, Carolyn, and I'll come a-running. We're real good friends, me and Carolyn." The big guy scrunched his face, confused. "Carolyn?" "Oh yeah," Irwin said. "Carolyn." The big guy narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Nobunanga?" "Yep. Nobunanga. Him too. Yep." He realized immediately that he had said the wrong thing. Not Nobunanga. Nobunanga. Oh, fuck. Oh. So, wait. The big guy narrowed his eyebrows suspiciously. Nobunanga? Yep. Nobunga. No. Oh. The big guy said suspiciously Nobunanga. Nobunanga. Yep. Nobunaga. Okay. Backtrack a little bit. So, what David, guy in tutu, the big guy narrowed his eyes, said Nobunanga. But Irwin said, "Yep, Nobunaga. Him too. Yep." He realized immediately that he had said the wrong thing. Not Nobunaga, Nobunanga. Ah, fuck. The big guy's eyes narrowed. He resumed spinning his pyramid. Irwin was thinking, was he... When he throws it, I'll twist right. Twist right and grab the chain. If I can... But he's so fucking fast. The big guy blinked. He leaned forward, brow furrowed. Then his eyes flew open wide, reminding Irwin of how Roger's brother looked when he recognized Irwin's name on the form. He pointed. "You, Irwin? Natana's?" The big guy held his hand to his shoulder as if it were wounded. Then pantomime working in squad automatic weapon, sweeping it back and forth, single-handedly suppressing an attack by a vastly superior force. Irwin considered his answer in a light of Israel flak jacket. The guy obviously insanity. Oh, fuck it, he thought. Yeah, Natan's. The big guy drew a breath. He stopped spinning the pyramid, then snapped to something almost, but not quite, like the US military version of attention. His feet were too wide. His chest poked out a bit too far for the army. Then, holding the spear perfectly vertical in his left hand, parade dress, he raised his right fist and banged it on his chest. He said something in a language Irwin had never heard before. Irwin wasn't going to salute back, not to this guy, but he nodded again. One of them days. Down the hallway, he heard a clatter of bullets falling on the tiles on the floor. A soft curse. The distant sound of the rifle being cooked. AR-15 proudly. The cops are still trying to fight back. Both Irwin and the big guy glanced back at the door. The big guy frowned, not liking what he saw out there. Then, just like that, he punched Steve in the jaw. Steve slumped, dazed, but not completely out of it. The big guy slung him over the shoulder. The two of them disappeared into the hall. Irwin heard gunfire, then screams, then a deep, booming laugh. He felt alive in a way he hasn't in Afghanistan. His veins were thumbing with energy. He got up and went looking for a gun. The rifle he had heard in the hallway, it was an AR-15. Was all bent up. He found a pistol in the locker room, but by then the big guy was gone. Steve was gone with him. Irwin followed a trail of bare, bloody footprints down the hall. The security door was blocked open by the fat lady with dirty feet. A hole the size of his hand gaped in her chest. Through it, he could see a big blood vessel, probably her aorta, all shredded up. The skinny chick with the skylark tattoo, apparently unharmed, knelt beside her, staring down with a blank expression on her face. "Bev," she said. "Beverly?" Irwin thought about telling the skinny girl that Beverly was with Ronnie Van Zank and Elvis, but he wasn't sure how it would go over. He settled for a patting her on the shoulder. The lobby was drenched with blood. Intestine dangles from the metal chairs, the light fixtures, the counter. Thick splinters of bulletproof glass layered strewn across the floor. He had seen that stuff before. He has seen that stuff break before. Just once, in an Iraq limousine, got hit by a depleted uranium slug from an A-10 Thunderbolt. He made his way through the lobby, checking for pulse and finding none. The older cop he'd seen smoking outside had been decapitated. If his head were still around, Irwin didn't see it. He stood over the dead cop for a minute, lip parsed, considering Lightning flashed off in the west. Someone in the lobby was screaming. He bent over and fished around in the dead cop's front pocket and retrieved a pack of Marlboro Lights and a Bic. Then made his way back to the chapel. Once inside, he kicked the door shut. He moved to a spot where he could look for the painting and slid down along the wall until his ass hit the floor. The buzz of the fluorescent light reminded him of the clouds of the flies around corpse. In a few minutes, there would be sirens, ambulance, SWAT team, report. He shook out a smoke, lit it, took a deep drag, relished in the head rush from the nicotine. On the bench in the front of him sat a newspaper picture of Carolyn and the water slide. In the background of the 25-year-old photo, someone who looked an awful lot like Steve Hobson, aged about 10, waited for his turn. Shit, Irwin thought. I really wanted to ask him about that. Up on the wall, Jesus or whomever held his hand out, keeping the dark thing of creation at bay. He heard the rumble again from the east, closer now. Thunder. End of chapter 4. Ooh. Giant man in tutu invading police sanctioned jail to take Hopkins away. What could that be about? I wonder. But what an interesting scene. I like this way this chapter was set up too, because it set up Irwin as a character, but also how they depict it's one of those days, foreshadowing like people know him from the movies, or he goes a whole day where no one recognizes him, right? So this is one of those days that they said that he'll be recognized for whatever book, movie, whatever, by name or by, I guess not by face, by name. And then the man in tutu recognizes him too. And it plays out so nicely because like he definitely doesn't want to be recognized for that, and desperately wants to remember for a more peaceful way of living. But the only reason why he lived was because of his pedigree. Is that probably, or for his reputation, right? And then because of Tutu's man's catalog, right? I guess I could just say it's David, right? And his history, like his catalog, he most likely have watched the movie. I guess maybe not watched, read. No, his catalog was so he could watch movies because he goes outside and does his catalog requires murder and stuff. So there's a chance that it could be he could have watched the film, right? More likely than reading the book. But this whole interaction is very unique because like it's not even focused around Carolyn, right? Only just by name, but then also about like a little backstory that how they got the duffel bag of money, right? They first alluded to that it was father, rich father, and then duffel bag of money, which still actually, now that I think about it, doesn't make sense for a rich girl to just carry a duffel bag full of money. But now we found out that it was actually a bank robbery that was done by Lisa in a bathrobe and cowboy hat, right? What a combination of these characters, which is very fun to just imaginative. But yeah, the world around them is still moving, even though we're not talking about them. That's what I love about this chapter. But yeah, that's the end of chapter 4. And chapter 5, called The Luckiest Chicken in the World. Can't wait to find out about this lucky chicken. And no interlude, so only chapter 5 next time. Anyways, Thanks for joining me.